What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr Wargames, and today I am bringing you my first place TrapTrix deck profile. Now this does involve the Theron engine. I'm going to explain it a little bit more in depth. I'll also show you my side deck at the end so you have an idea of what you might want to be adding in to your builds going forward. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. With all of that out of the way, let's dive headfirst into the profile. So my first matchup was the mirror. It was against TrapTrix, and what won me that game was the Theron engine because they just weren't expecting it. They were playing pure, and me being able to set that up both games 1 and 2 was able to help me protect my board as well as break their board. I ended up facing up against 2 Kashtira's, and this deck has an amazing time against Kashtira's, and there's a lot of cards in my side deck that really dealt with them quite nice and easily. And then I ended up facing 1 Branded and 1 Sword Soul. So again, pretty difficult matchups, but the deck did incredibly well. So in this version, I am now playing 3 Pudaka. I know I'm bouncing back between 2 and 3. The reason that this went up to 3 and it was a last minute change was because I changed out my Pot of Prosperity for Tantalizing Tune. I'll get there eventually. The reason this was actually a lot better for this version was for the pure fact that it meant that I had other alternatives in order to make sure that the Therion combo was as successful as possible. Now, for those of you that don't know, for the Therion combo, you need to get a plant to the graveyard. The main plants you have are, of course, your Pudaka and your Dioneer. What this did allow me to do, however, is if I didn't open up either of these or I couldn't get to the Dioneer before I wanted to try and go into my Therion play, it actually allowed me to use Mantis as another form of starter to complete this combo as long as I had the Tantalizing Tune. Now the reason for that is, you normal summon Mantis and then I searched out Pudaka to then activate the tune to ditch the Pudaka. Now obviously it's a bit of a different and a bit of an odd way around it because you wouldn't go for the Arachnacampa, but it did allow me to then go, okay, Tantalizing Tune, get rid of the Pudaka, guarantee there's a plant in the graveyard, and then I can go Mantis into Sarah, and obviously off the draws of the Tantalizing Tune, that could then ultimately lead me to more extenders, more plays, everything else I needed. So this worked out really nicely instead of Pot of Prosperity and bumping Pudaka up to 3. Arguably Dioneer could be at 2 as well. It's still something that I'm working on, but again, this gave me a bit of an edge because a lot of people just weren't expecting it. They were all expecting a Prosperity for digs, and this did really well. Obviously off the back of Pudaka as well, we are playing the 1 field spell. We are then going back to the 3 Momelo. Everyone should know now that this is kind of like the 1.5 card combo. So you've got Mantis, which is technically like the 1 card combo to get things going, and then you've got Momelo, which is the 1.5. And the 5 being opening up any normal trap card, because then that ultimately means you can go Momelo, search out your amazing Holotia, and then what you do off the back of that is you can then go Momelo into Sarah, activate the Holotia, discarding the trap card. Ideally, if you're discarding a whole trap card, you can then add it back when you special summon the Dioneer down. I went with 2 Arachnacampa. Now, the reason I went with 2 Arachnacampa is I bounced back between 3 and 2 so many times because the biggest weakness of a deck like this is if it loses its normal summon. And what I mean by that is if I normal summon a Mantis or a Momelo and I get Ogred, or if I get more commonly Gammered, then it's a really tricky situation. However, the local environment I was going to, I wasn't really fearful of that game 1. It was more so if I lost the dice roll and I didn't open up my board breaker in the form of Evenly Matched or the main deck of Nibiru, that I would have struggled a little bit. Luckily, I was able to kind of deal with that and I didn't really have much of an issue for it. But in that scenario, Arachnacampa coming up to 3 could be questioned, but it worked out perfectly fine for me at 2s. So that's it for the TrapTrix monsters. I wouldn't really change anything with the TrapTrix monsters themselves. The Arachnacampa is probably the only one you can consider, and maybe the Dioneer, but this has worked out quite nicely specifically for the Theron engine. If you're not playing the Theron engine, you can go back to Prosperities and you can cut a Pudaka down, or if you still want to be playing the Tantalizing Tune, again, you can still cut the Pudaka down and change it up a little bit. For the other monsters, of course, Triple Parallel Xyz, we all know how good this is for the deck. And then, of course, for the Theron engine was 1 Regulus, 1 Lily, and 1 Discoliseum. So for those of you that don't know how this combo works, the idea is that you get into what was like a 65p card is now a £7 card. Like, what the hell? So the idea is you get into your Spring Guns Merrymaker, and then you can rank the Merrymaker up into the Sargus, and then off the back of that, you have the ability to search out a Therion King Regulus, but ideally you're going to be searching out a Lily. You activate Lily, targeting a plant in the graveyard, which can come from your extra deck. you want to try and make it come from the main deck as much as possible. And then Lily searches out this Colosseum searches out Regulus, and then Regulus can attach to the Lily, or bring Lily back from the graveyard attached to it, and you've got a nice little negate off of Regulus as well. For the hand traps, we were playing triple Ash Blossom, double Nibiru, and double Imperm. This is just one of these ones where I wanted to try and keep the deck count down, which is why I ended up going for a 2 and a 2. I feel that Nibiru is more important and more effective this format, purely because Imperm, yes, it will slow certain matchups down, but in the mirror match, completely dead. It's not the most ideal one in a Labyrinth matchup. It's okay in a branded matchup, but Nibiru is 100 times better. And then again, Nibiru is better in a Kashtira matchup. Like, you're much better just sitting back in a Cash matchup and saying, okay, do whatever you want to do, and then go Nibiru. Because not only will that give you a monster, yes, their monster is like a fat stack that you have to get rid of, and that's where your extra deck comes into play a lot more. But it is just a way of being able to clear an entire board, and if your opponent clears your board, you still have a fallback if you end up going first. So you're in a good position. So that's it for the hand trap. That's it for, of course, the Therion package. Very, very small package, but it's kind of like increased in value, so it's not as easy to pick up anymore. And then, of course, for the trap cards, we've got three Holotia, 1 Gravediggers, 1 Terrifier, and 1 Floodgate. I really want to put this back up to 2. Like, I just feel that this is such a good card, because especially in the cash matchup, like, you Floodgate your opponent, that's it. But what I have kind of learned is that off of Sarah, you always really want to be setting the Holotia. And then off of your Rafflesia is when you want to be sending the Floodgates, the Terrifier, and the Gravediggers, and then you want to recycle them and Dioneer. It's just a lot easier to do that. You can play the other trap hole cards. I know people play Bottomless. I know people also play the Time Space. It's entirely up to you and what you're going to be facing. I feel these are the 3 best ones. In my opinion, it probably goes Floodgate 1, Gravedigger 2, and then Terrifier 3, and then everything else can kind of change up as you see fit. I'm still playing the 3 Shade Brigadine. I can't understand why people are getting rid of this. Like, yeah, I get it. They've got their own form of the Holotia. But at the end of the day, if I have route to Holotia, so let's say I open up Shade Brigadine plus Mantis, like, I would much rather, like, Mantis search out Arachnocampa, turn Mantis into Sarah, set the Shade Brigadine, activate the Shade Brigadine, Sarah's effect, trigger, special summon out Mamelo from the deck if you want to. That will then trigger to let you set another Holotia. And then, of course, you then be able, or set the Holotia, and then you can go into Time Thief Redoer. You could then activate the Holotia if you've got an additional trap in the hand. That will then summon out, and then you've got the ability to activate Arachnocampa. So then your end board becomes a Redoer plus a Rafflesia. Like, I just think it's such a good card for the deck that it's a no-brainer to be playing, in my opinion, anyway. And in Triple Evenly Matched, again, this card's so good. The fact that it's a normal trap card, absolutely insane. Go second, break a board. Go first, ditch it off of your Holotia. Very, very easy discard fodder. Works out really, really nicely. So, such a great reprint for the structure deck. I'm so glad that they actually kept Evenly Matched in the structure deck. Moving on to the extra deck, I have kind of stuck with the 2 Atlas. 2 is a little bit of an overkill because it's very rare that you go through the 2 of them. 1 puts in a huge amount of work, boosting all your TrapTrix monsters, turns them into boss monsters themselves, and kind of allows you to get away with a little bit of unexpected murder with this deck. Then we've got the Kalaria and then Triple Sarah. I don't think you should be playing any less than Triple Sarah. It's not that you are afraid of the Mind Hacker. Like, the Mind Hacker sucks, but you should be playing 3 Sarahs anyway. Like, it's just so good. You go into it so consistently. And then specifically in this version, if you need to, you actually have the ability of, you put it to the graveyard, go into your Kalaria, and then put this in the graveyard, and that's your plant target for your Therion engine. For the, well, the only other Link monster we play is the 1 Link Spider. Just mention that. Slash your Shade Brigadine into this. If you're not playing Shade Brigadine, then you cut it completely, but I just feel that, you know, it's a no, again, in this particular build, or the way that I'm playing this deck, it's a no-brainer to be doing it. And then for the TrapTrix XYZs, we've got the 1 Alamirus, the 1 Rafflesia, and the 1 Penigula. Obviously, all 3 of these are insanely good. Rafflesia is your go-to to stop Nibiru's. If you are worried about Mind Hacker taking it out, you can put a second one in, but all of these at 1 just works out perfectly fine for me. I need to find my other Rose sleeves so that I can Rose the rest of them up. I had to de-sleeve them for the event, but, you know. And then for the other Rec 4s, I went with Roach. You can probably cut this if you want. It's personal preference on that one. Bagooska, just to slow the game down and stun out if you have been board broken. 1 Time Thief Reader, such a good card in this deck. Like, make this with a trap card, steal your opponent's spells, draw a card, bounce card, and run away from danger. And then the last two cards, of course, are the Merrymaker and the Sargus. Now, what makes these even better, or the idea is, the only reason you need the Merrymaker is so you can rank on top to the Sargus. What Sargus provides you is it provides you instantly with 2 boss monsters before getting into your Atopus. And then obviously the back of that, you've got 2 boss monsters. You'll have this and Regulus. And then if you detach a material off of the Panicula, if you detach off of the Alamiris, if you detach it off of Rafflesia, you can then trigger Sargus effect to pop a card. So going second, like it's a great card going first because it can set you up interruption during your opponent's turn with Rafflesia's detach, heck, even with Roach's detach or Redoer's detach. But then on top of that as well, it's going to set you up a nice little Omni Negate in the form of the Regulus. And then the best thing about that is if you have the ability of getting the Regulus back to the hand or looping it around, you can just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. But you shouldn't need to worry about that. The Regulus is there to stop you getting even lead, and that's your biggest threat. But then I've also got a card in the side deck that really, really helped me and was MVP, I'm telling you. Like, actually, there was 3 card choices I made for my side deck that were MVPs. They just put in so much work. It was incredible. Speaking of which, so one of the first cards that was an MVP is Artifact Lancia. This put in so much work is great. Because the amount of times my opponent would go, okay, cool. Standby phase, yep. Main phase, yep. Battle phase, and you're like, oh. End of battle phase, and I went, okay, Lancia. And that was it. They just didn't, they couldn't do anything. And if they were playing Cashteras, not only could they not break my board, but the Cashteras completely stop because they can't Fenrir it in response. They can't look at my extra deck with either Mind Hacker or with Unicorn. And because they can't then trigger the Shangri-La to banish a card face down to lock a zone, they can't even get into a Rise Heart. So this card was MVP. Off the back of that as well, some of the older branded were still going with the branded and white play. They were still going with more of the Bystials. God, I completely forgot what they were there. So they're still going with more of the Bystials. So when they activate Bystial, they target the card as effect. You chain Lancia. Lancia resolves, meaning they can't banish, which then means that they couldn't then summon down the Bystial. Now, obviously, that's not the best option, like the best way for it. But it kind of did give you that ability to stop it happening. Now, keeping in mind, this is only during their turn. You can't do it during your turn, which is why it's such a great side counter against Evenly. But it did mean that in a cash matchup, that I was definitely putting this in anyway, I never feared Evenly. So then for the spell card, I went with 2 Eclipses. And the reason I went with 2 Eclipses and not 3 is I actually made a couple of sacrifices. So right at the last minute, I was like, I really, 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 really want to put this card in. I really wanted to put Gozen in. So, in order to put Gozen in, I sacrificed 1 Eclipse and 1 Judgment. It worked. Whew, so glad it worked. So, the reason that Judgment was less effective is because my biggest threat, like, you don't care about imperms. You don't really care about certain trap cards that are going to try and, like, negate Sarah or anything like that. I didn't really worry too much about Lightning Storms for the pure fact that I would always, game 2, rely more on the Arachnacampa. Like, I would make sure I was ending my board with Arachnacampa face up, protecting my back row. So, in response to that, what I did have the ability is Gozen. Like, if I just played with the Earths, yes, it was a little bit tricky with the Sargus, but what you do have to keep in mind is that the Fearonkin Regulus is an Earth. So worst case scenario, I would flip a Gozen and lock myself into Earths, getting rid of the Sargus, while already having a face-up Fearonkin Regulus on the board. So I was able to kind of double protect that way and keep him in rotation, while also shutting down the cash board. On top of that as well, that if you felt that your Fearon Engine was going to get cut out the next turn, you could just take the Fearon Engine out for the Gozens. But it works really, really nicely against the branded matchup, because if you're already playing stuff like D-Barriers, Judgments, and stopping their branded fusion going off with Ashes, flipping a Gozen on them, locking them into Darks, means they don't even have their backup option of being able to go into Cartesia, which is really, really important. So even if they activate branded fusion and they're trying to set up their Cartesia plays, you flip Gozen match, that's it. They can't even special the Cartesia down, which is very, very damaging for them. And then for the rest of the traps, triple D-Barrier, and then the other MVP of this deck, my god, this put in work, was Anti-Spell. Anti-Spell for this deck is absolutely insane, because it means you 100% are not getting Lightning Stormed. It really, really slows down the branded player, because the best thing about that is technically what you could do is you could flip Anti-Spell and they're like, okay, well, I set the branded fusion pass to you. And if you can't kill them off and you've got a D-Barrier, you just go, okay, cool, pass, and then they go, activate branded fusion, chain D-Barrier, and they're like, oh, it gives you 2 turns to get into an Ash, or 2 turns to get into a D-Barrier. Cash matchup, no Field Spell, no Theosis. The only thing that they can do to get rid of this is to go Special on Fenrir, which they mean they have to hard open to get to it. Special on Fenrir, and then Fenrir attack to then banish the Fragrance. But 9 times out of 10, if they special summon out the Fenrir, I'm just going to go, okay, cool. Rafflesia or Floodgate or anything, flip it face down. I'm not worried. Like, it just doesn't do anything. Very, very important, very, very powerful. And then even then, I just drop a Lancia on them. And then so they try and make their play to out the anti-spell. I just go, cool, Lancia. And they're like, oh, guess I can't get rid of this then. And that's it. You just lock them down and then you start picking it off bit by bit. So very, very good, very, very powerful. And that's what makes this deck so good, is it with the new stuff, it's just so much more consistent, and it definitely has a way of being able to produce an OTK option equivalent, which is really, really good and very, very powerful. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. For now, as absolutely always, guys, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.